I have this problem where I'll raise my hand all the time. I'll do it. I'll do it. And that
All
creates
right.
bottlenecks so fast that I've just learned to stop doing that. I've learned to tell my employees, part of your job description, the most important part is your job is to make my life easier or my job easier.
Every year I would reflect and I would say I'm more dependent on people around me than I've ever was. And for me, it's such a difficult thing because I'm a control freak and I value my independence. And so the more people I depend on, actually, the harder it is for me to accept, because it's like, I can't really make a move without affecting or being affected by like 5, 7, 10 people. Right. And it feels like it's restricting my freedom. But at the same time, because of the systems we've built, I actually have more freedom, because otherwise I'd be trying to do everything myself, and then I would become the bottleneck of my own, success.
That's a good description. I think, we like to keep people long term. So most of our employees have been with us since 2009 or 2007, for the most part. And then we've grown over time, but our core employees are that duration. We don't lose many people. We lose a few, but if they're lost, they're usually lost very early on because they say it's just not for them. Like there's no politics. Right. Like I don't want to have someone call me and say, "Oh, Susie's not doing her job." I'm like, "Well, you should go talk to Susie," and don't put me in the middle of this nonsense, and let them. Like I don't want to be your mom. It's just not cool. And I also have that. I have this perfectionism streak that I'm always fighting. And I also have this problem where I'll raise my hand all the time. I'll do it. I'll do it. And that creates bottlenecks so fast that I've just learned to stop doing that. And I've learned to tell my employees, part of your job description, the most important part is your job is to make my life easier or my job easier. So if you're managing up, meaning trying to find ways I can do things for you, that won't work here because I'm not doing your job. I pay you to do your job. And it's just, and if you're blaming other people, then you're not needed here. We're trying to be clear with people, especially up front. And the people that stay really like it. And we also try to find ways for people to grow. Like I have, like the woman that helped set this up, Julie. So Julie started out just part-time doing affiliate work for us, just part-time. And now she's blossomed. She has her own team now that does what she used to do at the beginning. She's still high touch, still involved with things, but she's now has her own podcast. She's doing podcasts, like marketing podcasts for us. She's out networking, finding new relationships. And so she's grown. And, she wrote a book that she said to me kind of sheep, so could you, write a review for my book? I'm like, sure, let me have the book. And I read it.
Yeah, I actually got a copy. I'm waiting for it to arrive in the mail. It's called Zero to More, I think.
Yes. So she was a zero. Yeah, I think it's 0 to more, 0 to something. But she's her story was she grew up in a family where everybody told her she was just crap and worthless and would never amount to anything. And despite that, she was very driven and she found a way to succeed. And now she's like unstoppable. And it's really interesting hearing someone talk about how they had to sort of remake themselves with things like the self-improvement work that we were talking about a little bit before, with like the Tony Robbins, Napoleon Hill, reading those books, digesting them and internalizing them. Sometimes we have to raise ourselves. If our parents didn't do it, sometimes we got to remake ourselves.
Yeah. It's funny. Like I had a really weird relationship with my dad because to a certain point in my young, self life, I looked up to him as my hero, but then at some point it switched and I hated him. I don't know if it's a hormonal thing or whatever, but I remember distinctly a period in my life where almost everything he was doing, I would almost on purpose do the opposite. And I have like a whole list of things that I know the way I am today is because it's the opposite of how my dad was. And I considered it to be like really, like, for example, I don't drink at all. Like my dad used to heavily drink vodka, just like any Russian man. It was a part of like the culture and everything else. So I take as pride that I'm alcohol free and have been since I can remember. And then just one example would be like, okay, whatever my dad was doing, I do the opposite. So in a way, I can even go as far as saying it's like I can thank him for showing me what not to do. You know what I mean? Because at my age, he had his first heart attack.
Wow.
And by the age of 60, he had two heart attacks, a bypass, diabetes, kidney failure. He's getting hooked up to a dialysis machine every other day. So compared to other 60-year-olds, he's not really living, sort of existing.
I guess we can. There's probably lots he did right too, though. I would assume, or some of it, most
Probably,
likely.
yeah. So he had an entrepreneurial bit where, I did see him make decisions and live with decisions, take risks. One of the risks he took actually resulted in us moving to Israel because we didn't move because everything was great. We moved because everything was bad. We had to sell our car in our apartment. You would say we were middle class in Ukraine and pay off a mobster from whom he borrowed money.
Oops.
And just having $1,000 in savings, we moved to Israel to start over. So that was like a consequence of a risk. But at the same time, because of the war in Ukraine, I look back on the decision. I used to think, oh, he took me away from my friends and my development. My life would have been different if I stayed there because I had a really terrible time adapting to the Israeli culture. But at the same time, now, 23 years later, after we moved, I can look back and say, you know what? That was a good decision because if it wasn't, I wouldn't be doing this. I promise you that I would be doing something else, and I like what I do, and at the same time, I'd probably be somewhere in the front lines, maybe already shot, by a Russian tank or drone or whatever. So that decision was great, and it had a tremendous impact not only on the immediate bloodline, right, but on my kids now
Yeah,
who are
they have
now
a
getting
father.
to grow up in Canada. Yeah. So I guess it's kind of like one of those stories about a man who was walking his horse and his son was on the horse, and all the villagers said, "Oh, that's bad. His son is on the horse and he's walking." And then his son, fell off the horse and broke a leg, and the villagers would be like, "Oh, this is terrible because his son can't walk." Oh, and the man says, "Well, we'll see." And then, some time passes and there's a war, and all the young men are being recruited into the army to fight for the emperor. So, everyone in the village is like, "Oh, he's so lucky he doesn't get to go to war because he's got a broken leg." And the father says, "We'll see." So, like, you can take the philosophical approach and just say everything flows and you can make good with anything. It's your decision, right? It's your judgment that has to come into play, and you have to decide what you do with it.